So we have been in a financial planning process. Your board identified early on in their time together that getting clarity about Mountain Vista's financial position and getting that clarity with some real clear numbers rooted in data and rooted in kind of picture a table with a lot of people looking at data together to see if we could understand Mountain Vista's financial future and if we could create a tool that would help us move through and make good decisions in the future. We hired a consultant, Barry Finkelstein from Stewardship for Us, who worked with you all on your highly successful capital campaign. And he came back, and for the last 5 months, you can see some of those names on that front sheet right there. He has been working with us individually and in small groups and in dyads since October, looking at numbers and creating a spreadsheet. And then creating some understanding of where we might go from here. So the next 30 or so minutes, as me and Tom walk you through this story, I'm inviting you into a lot of people's good work and a lot of people's effort and energy into figuring out what the future might look like. And before we get started, I think one thing I do want to name is that I know each of us individually brings a lot of energy to the conversation about money. So like money is an issue that many of us have lots of different feelings about, different experiences about. Some of us have experienced incredible scarcity. Some of us have experienced incredible abundance. Some of us experience both of those things in different ways. And each of us brings our own personal story about money and how we deal with money when we have a conversation like this. So as we move through this, it's another chance for ministry together, because we're coming together on a topic that impacts each of us, and yet we don't often talk about it. And here's another chance for us to practice being complex, looking at something with a loving and curious gaze, and taking care of each other through openness and conversation. So with that.
I began coming to MVUU in September of 2015. And since that time, I've seen 2 ministers. I've attended 4 different venues and been through a pandemic. Together, through all of that, we have been resilient. We have managed to come through all that, and we continue to be strong. Next slide.
There's ways that this community has been resilient that are very concrete, and we want to start with that because it's very grounded information. First is you grew and deepened a mission. So there's lots of ways to think about growth. Growth is not just numbers, but it's also about deepening, right? So you actually deepened your ministries. You designed an entirely new mission, values, and end statement. In a pandemic on Zoom, when people were exhausted, 65 people showed up to that small group process to design an identity that's now really rooted in love. And then you had all 3 of your previous ministers, which coming back to you with kind of loving affirmation of all the things you've been through together and celebrating that it was worth it and that you did good and that they're really excited for you. And then you actually did grow in numbers too. So my first year with you, just before the pandemic, even when you were renting a building at 1 p.m., you grew by 12% in membership. Then during a pandemic, when your building was completely closed and all people could get to know us through, and some of you are in this room, was over Zoom, you grew about 5.5% per year. So each year, even, really against the odds, you've grown. And then we built out some pieces of our website that actually allow us to track people coming and connecting with us. And since 2020, this number actually is already outdated by about a month. So it's probably closer to about 92 or 93 people have reached out saying, I really want to learn more about your community. So I would just say that this was a really big sticking point with Barry, our consultant who works with lots of other congregations in the United States. This is not the same trends that other congregations were experiencing. And really want to just take that in. And that was a lot of hard work by you all, making caring heart circles. It was a lot of work by the community connections team, meeting with people individually, but really take that in. Even when you're closed and online, you're growing. And I think that's really because you're doing ministry well. again, even when you're closed, even when the building's not there, even online, you had Caring Hearts leaders. I'm looking at Pi and Julie and Beth and Connie, and then all of the individual circle leaders. Over 80 of you, which is a huge majority of our congregation, stayed engaged in Caring Hearts circles now for almost 2 years. Then our pastoral care team, initially I had a number in here, but the number just kept growing because I was asking people what kinds of caring activities you've done. I can't tell you, it's probably closer to thousands and thousands of visits and calls and cards and meal drop-offs and care gifts. The pastoral care practices of this community just completely blossomed, I think, in the last 3 years. This became one of your greatest strengths, is your ability to care for each other. Your lifespan religious exploration program tripled. I mean, like, okay, take this in, families. You tripled your RE program during COVID. We welcomed 5 brand new families into our program, and you supported me, and you supported another birth of a baby Adelina, the baby of Joe and Amanda, by showing up when we were giving birth and that our families were recovering. You really know how to show up for each other and for families. And then you kept learning and leading. So, I mean, when I count about the kinds of small groups you did, it was over 11 different small groups that showed up and came together. You had 12 people do a program that was challenging transphobia called Transforming Hearts. You had 35 of you in Beloved Conversations. And then we had 10 people in the last 2 years do advanced leadership training. So really, you resist stagnancy, I would say.
So not only have we tried to take care of each other, but we've reached beyond our walls through a number of social justice initiatives, thanks to the work of Sherry and Theta and many others, Jambor and others. We have a Contigo program that's to be envied around the country. They've provided legal sponsorship to over 25 asylum seekers. They've accompanied 4 asylum seekers and hosted them in Tucson, raised $17,000 in support of their work, and that program continues to operate and grow. Thanks to the work of Chuck Tatum and Ann, we also have a schools partnership with 2 different elementary schools where volunteers go and offer support to the schools in a variety of ways, including backpacks. And I think the latest project is a tree planting program. We've also, as a congregation, provided over $3,000 in tax credits to the local school district. In addition, we sponsor, along with many other churches, work in social justice around Arizona through UU Jazz and the Baja 4, through our statewide justice network. And we've collaborated and developed a very substantial model with the Baja 4, which again has become virtually a national model for how to do work through this pandemic period. Let's go on to our next slide. So I think for most of us, the most visual representation of the last several years of the incredible amount of work that's been done and fundraising has been the home that we hope to be back in next week and beyond. The work of the PMT, the Ambiance Committee, and all the different people that have put their hearts and souls into fundraising, into purchasing, finding, purchasing, and decorating this beautiful building that we are going to use as our spiritual home. It's twice the usable space compared to Cromwell. We also have developed through that process raising a capital campaign of over $900,000 to pay for that asset. Just to give you a kind of a picture, in I believe it was 2016, 2017 maybe, when Cromwell was sold, it was sold for over $700,000. Today, we have an asset that's worth well over $2 million. And that's with a $470,000 mortgage, of course, which we want to pay off over the next several years. But it's quite an accomplishment to go from where we were in 2017 to where we are today with this beautiful home, this beautiful spiritual home that we are about to get back into. So during that time, we had rough spots, but we listened just enough. We had lots of ideas, but we had just enough skill. We had a lot of different ideas, but we collaborated just enough. We had a lot of people who made commitments, just enough, and just enough luck to pull us through. And yes, we raised just enough money. We are in a financial situation where this slide presents to you today. You can see what our current picture is in terms of income. We're expecting about $150,000+ in pledges. We have received final payment from Cromwell as of about a month ago, which was a little over $85,000, so that they have completely paid off that property to us. We have building rental and cell phone tower rental of a little over $17,000, donations for a variety of other issues of over $13,000. We currently have an endowment fund that's worth about $3,000. That's a percent of the total, I think. The actual endowment fund is much larger than that. And we have just completed a fundraiser that raised another $1,800. So you can see overall that we have a total projected income of about $275,000 this year. And this is our current budget in raw data. Our ministry within, that's our services, music, our development, lifespan development programs, our pastoral care, all of those things. The ministry within is $165,000 of our projected budget this year. Our ministry beyond is about $63,000, and this home requires about $82,000 a year, we think, in terms of expenses, capital expenses, and facilities, et cetera. So that's the current projected budget, and that amount is just around $288,000 or so. So that's with the pass-through money, accounting the pass-through money. We currently have reserves of approximately $93,000. As you can see, we have set aside, our previous board and current board has set aside $50,000 in a restricted fund for large expenses that may come down the pike for roofing or air conditioning systems, things of that nature. And we also have a restricted endowment fund of just under $100,000 that comes with certain rules in the sense that we can only access as a board 5% of those funds annually as approved by the endowment committee. So that's our current picture on our reserves.
So one thing I think when me and Tom are looking at this and the board and the finance committee and the planning team is just, there's like a lot of wow in it. There's a lot of resilience. And I guess one thing to say is that when you look at all that, that's all numbers. There's nothing in there that we have kind of like glossed over or made really overly pretty. That's actually like the realness of Mountain Vista in terms of the last few years and where you are now. And it's a picture that's very resilient. It's not a picture where I'm coming to you saying, your membership is stagnant, people stop paying their pledges and no one's coming to services and all your small groups are closing. That's not the picture we have for you right now. Through a pandemic, through an interim, through a transition, it's something else. It really is. And I would just sit with that because I'm sure you've either contributed to that or you've been impacted by that, and kind of marvel at the resiliency of the community. And so we take that kind of into the planning tool that we created. And I want to emphasize that it's a tool rather than a plan. We don't have a plan that we're going to present to you today as much as we have something that helps us make good decisions together and informed decisions together. Again, this whole process began in October 2021. It was a huge collaboration of staff, board members, and finance committee members. We looked at real numbers related to the resources we have in those categories: resources, revenue, and expenses for 3 years prior and 6 years projected into the future. And then we've chosen to present to you one snapshot of that tool. The tool is dynamic in that you can change different things in the tool to create different snapshots. But the snapshot we're going to show you today is something that we think is a pretty conservative projection. It includes numbers that we think we're really likely to reach, numbers that we've kind of already shown you in terms of growth or in terms of other programming. And then different options we think that can help us meet the future based on some of the discernment of your board and finance committee. And what's great about this is that your future teams can use this as a tool in real time. You actually now have a baseline to work against. I'm going to show you a snapshot of the tool itself, but I'm not going to linger there because it's a lot of numbers. And what we want to show you are the highlights. But I want to give you a glimpse of what work went into the highlights we're going to focus on. So this is one snapshot of the tool itself. You can see our year is actually that beautiful Adobe salmon color. And then you can see the different areas we worked on. Above this is actually the resource drivers and reserves. Then we have a section on predicted cash flow, a section on expenses that we can predict into the future, many of which you'll see are related to about a 5% growth expectation. But really look down here at the bottom. Each of those represent a tab rich in data. So behind every single line is a tab where we looked more deeply at numbers and trends. So what we show you going forward is based on this piece that now finance committees and boards have into the future. And there's three things as we decided the snapshot we want to show you. We are holding three kind of key priorities. One is you've been growing at the programmatic and staff levels that you have now. And you want to continue growing. That's been that hope emerged in some of your small group work. That's emerged in your board work. When you were imagining the new mission statement, there's a vision of growth that needs to be clarified, but there's this feeling of a widening that you are hoping for. So you want to keep widening, and you want to keep widening and deepening your ministries, which you've gotten really good at. And we're wanting to keep staff. So the snapshot we're going to show you does not at this point in time cut staff or staffing or programming. We also were trying to figure out a way to say, okay, if we want to keep those things, at least at the path we've been doing, we also want to balance the budget. So we need to come up with a way, no matter what these numbers are, to keep our budget balanced. And the third piece, replenish our reserves. We really want to follow best practices around having the kind of money available that can help us in a real fiscal issue or a real building issue or another unpredictable thing like we've learned in the past. So these are the three things we were kind of holding in our mind when we were looking at numbers. And here's what the numbers look like. When we imagine the next 3 years, for example, these are the kinds of deficits that we might actually be facing based on the desire to keep staffing, programming, and our building at the same levels that we have been maintaining the last couple of years. You can see this year, we're predicting about a $13,000 deficit, which would be pulled from the reserves. That number is significantly lower than you see in the next 3 years because of the Cromwell payment. The Cromwell payment was an immediate kind of boost to our budget and was hoped for, not predicted, but hoped for in last year's budget. When you approved last year's budget, we were saying it is highly likely the Cromwell money will come in when you made the decisions about the budget you did last year. But you can see the budget gets better. You can see that the deficit decreases. However, it doesn't decrease that quickly at this rate. Again, this is based on maintaining the same numbers that you've already maintained, a 5% growth rate in your membership, pretty equal availability of pledge and the fulfillment of pledges, and it leads to this amount. Now, there is one thing that I think I would love for Tom to explain, which is a COVID-related loan that your board has applied for with the Finance Committee.
Yeah. So one of the decisions that our board has made is to apply for a COVID-related loan. It's called an EIDL loan, which stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan. This was part of the federal government's effort to help organizations during the pandemic. Those funds have been applied for through the work of Ann Marshall, myself, and Theta and others. We have not received an actual decision at this point. The loan program is administered through the Small Business Association. What it offers is this: it would offer us much greater flexibility and budgeting process, particularly around the mortgage over the next several years. For example, that loan for not-for-profits, assuming we get approved, would lower our interest rate to 2.75% for the current, assuming we paid off the mortgage and use this loan money to pay off the mortgage. It also gives us a 30-year payback period and a 2-year grace period where we don't have to make any payments at all. Not to say that we wouldn't, but it gives us a lot more decision flexibility when it comes to thinking about how we might approach balancing the budget over the next several years. So that's what the EIDL loan application would offer us, assuming we get that approved.
And there's lots of decisions your finance committee and board could make about how to, if we receive that money, how to use it best. You can imagine all the different scenarios that they would need to think about: repayment or penalties or investing. So there would be a decision about that they would need to make. In one model, one random model, it might decrease our annual costs by about $16,000, which, as you could see with this, would make a pretty significant dent in the deficit that we're looking at. But we did not include that here. So we're giving you, if we do not receive that loan, these are the numbers we're looking at. So we have some strategies when we look at those numbers and we choose not to panic and we say, how do we want to stay resilient? How do we want to keep growing, widening, and deepening? And here's a few things that we think we should prioritize to do that. First is the path of membership. The growth that we've experienced through the last 3 years is just incredible. It is a product of outreach strategies, one-on-one connections through community connections and meeting with people face-to-face on Zoom or in person, having vibrant small groups that we get to plug people into immediately so that they get to build meaningful and real relationships and find belonging. Membership is not about just plugging in and pledging. It's about people really finding belonging. We want people to come in, become members, or become lifelong friends because I found my people. And finding your people doesn't just happen because I walk through the door. It happens because we make a place where people get held and loved and cared for. And so one of our strategies needs to be, how do we keep loving, holding, and caring for the people who walk through our doors so that they go, these are my people. That includes imagining and continuing multi-platform. Everything over the last 2 years has been online. So it would be foolish of us now to walk away from continuing an online presence and valuing just as much the in-person and the online audience. And you could see that in some of the data we have on our YouTube channel, for example. A second piece is about pledge fulfillment. This pledge fulfillment means some of us, we make a pledge that we might give or a financial commitment, and then it's the amount that we actually are able to give by the end of the year. And in the last couple of years, that number has been between 85% to about 89% fulfillment. And there's lots of reasons why that happens. Sometimes we move, sometimes our financial situation changes, sometimes we choose to leave the community. Sometimes we don't get asked or reminded. So what we would like to do is to try to move to a 90% fulfillment rate, which we could get pretty close to. If we did that in the model that we've created, then that would actually be about $70,000 over the next 5 years. So that small amount, that couple percent difference, makes a huge difference in terms of having just having clarity about, when we give, reminding each other what we've given, being honest if we need to make changes about that, and then meeting the need. The third piece is a rental program, which I know we've been longing to do. We have this beautiful new building. We want people to use it. There's ways we've said we want to be a beacon in this community. We want to be a resource. We want people to think to themselves, we should use that badass church down on Orange Grove. They're awesome. I want to have my wedding there. I want to have my coffee house meeting there. I want to do a poetry slam there. I want to have a concert there. So to do that, though, that just doesn't happen. We have to build a website that actually gets people excited to use our building. We have to kind of outreach to people like wedding coordinators who think of our building for people who are going and getting married and saying, hey, you should check out this congregation. We don't imagine doing that well right off the bat. We imagine over the next 5 to 6 years, making that an income stream of about $20,000 by 5 years from now. So again, a really conservative hope. But again, it's another area where we would actually need to do some investing. We need to find the people in our community who go, I totally want to do that, and build a team around it. And then the fourth is about deepening our resources. So, and this is specifically about planned giving and what we're going to call a sustainability fund. And the sustainability fund is really brand new, and planned giving is probably more familiar to you. And I want to go into those two options a little more deeply. Having resources, having kind of a well of resources drawn is a very normal reality for congregations. It's totally normal that pledges do not always cover the costs of keeping a building or a community open. Just like a nonprofit, which many of you have run, you have to look at lots of different kinds of streams of resources and revenue to sustain a community. And it's actually really good to have lots of different kinds, because if one has an issue, then you can actually have a diversity of options to draw on. What we want to do is get better about our deeper resources. So what we have right now is we have reserves, which includes that $50,000 building fund. That's a product of bequest money, and that's a product of savings each year. We have periodic bequests, which I'll share more about later, that have been a huge benefit. Periodic unimagined bequests have been a huge resources community. These are people who have left us in their will or estate planning, and then suddenly they're just nourishing the future leaders of the community that once maybe mattered to them. So we want to imagine, you can kind of see this going forward. We want to get better about that. And then we have our endowment fund, which is the principal we cannot touch without congregational approval, but a 5% percentage we can touch for special projects in the community approved by the endowment committee. I think a shift that we see us making well is to think more strategically about these different pools and resources of funds. So we want to get better about two things in particular. One is a sustainability fund, the new idea, and another one is planned giving. The sustainability fund. A sustainability fund is a newer concept that emerged specifically out of the pandemic that we were introduced to by our financial consultant. And it just acknowledges the really complex ways that the pandemic hit communities that relied on rental income, for example, maybe a church that had been open and said, oh, 1/3 of our income is rental income, suddenly had no rental income for 2 years. And they couldn't have predicted that. So a sustainability fund is one tool that congregations are using to say, we need a short-term campaign that helps us replenish our reserves and grow our ministries. Because of the pandemic, we have fallen behind, or we're experiencing a deficit. We need to rebuild ourselves after such a huge event. And we need to do that with something that feels a little bit like a short-term capital campaign, but instead of investing in a building, we're investing it in ourselves, our programming, our staff, our care, our ministry. So the first priority of a sustainability fund, which is a little bit like a short-term capital campaign, would be to balance the books. So you saw the deficit that we're predicting each year. And that deficit is based on the idea that we do things the same as we've done and not make any too big investments at this point in time. So we'd at the minimum sustain ourselves. However, if we do even better, we could actually invest that money into growth strategies. So for example, if we were to raise $100,000 this year, right? So let's say that enough of us had something to give, whether it was an IRA or it was a certain amount from stocks or something that we're actually allowed to transfer over. And we were able to raise $100,000 this year for this fund. That would balance the budget next year without cutting programming or staff or facilities. Then it would give an extra so much money, maybe about 20 to 25K, to make a decision with, either to grow or invest in and replenish reserves, or to say, let's do something bold. Maybe we need to invest in our membership program. So maybe we actually want to increase some hours temporarily for our administrator, or maybe we want to ask for a new position to be open that helps us focus entirely on membership. Maybe we want to create a class and we need to do something interesting with that. Maybe we want to do some specific targeted outreach in the community that lets people know we're here and that we're their people and we're desperate to find where we want to find each other. And let's say if your board and finance committee said that that was the thing they wanted to invest in, they'd have a baseline. Because we've done this financial planning tool, we know where we're starting at. So we know if we're not reaching a goal and we can re-strategize. Or they might say, let's dig into the rental program. Everyone is getting married now because we've all been waiting too long for COVID to be over. Why not strategize around really pushing our building as a beautiful venue in Northwest Tucson? Okay, let's invest a little chunk of money after we've balanced the books to see what we can do if we really put some effort into being a venue in the community. And like I said, we can test about that, checking back against and evaluating our baseline now. The goal of the Sustainability Fund is this: it's to balance the books and to invest in your growth without cutting staff or programming, because you've already been growing. We think, based on different projections, depending on the EIDL or not, around 200 to 250,000 would cover the cost for the next 5 years of deficits. And if we raise that, great. If we don't, that's fine too. But any money we raise in this fund gives your minister, gives your board, gives your finance committee, gives all your leaders a chance to take a breath after COVID and then engage in ministry from a place of, we can do this. And we've already shown that we can. The piece about the planned giving program would be this: since 2019, 2009, Mountain Vista has received 9 bequests. And those bequests have totaled over $583,000, which is about an average of $45,000 a year. It's a significant part of the income of this community. And it's also a normal part of the income of a community where you have people who care about the community, were nourished by the community, and then want to leave something behind for the community. But can you imagine if we actually just started asking each other and creating the resources for each other to do more intentional planned giving? Like, what if we were to ask ourselves and each other, is Mountain Vista in your will or planned giving or in your estate? And then the interesting conversation that emerges out of that is also just about your own sense of belonging in this community and if it's meeting your needs and if it's caring for you. But this could even, the beauty of a planned giving program is that people make commitments now that nourish leaders in the future like us. We were nourished by 2 unexpected bequests that happened in my first and second year of ministry with you that allowed us to complete the building. You can't make this stuff up. So the decisions and the commitments that this people make now, feed and nourish and sustain the people going that are the future leaders of Mountain Vista.
So what do we need from each other? Well, I think of it in this way. I think of the reasons that I became a UU was because I believe that part of the purpose that we have as a community is to be the stewards of what I call the important invisibles: love, compassion, giving, justice, etc. So what do we need from each other to do that? We need to engage each other with our time, talent, and treasure. We talk about that a lot, but we really do want you to think about how you spend your time, how you spend your money, and how you spend your energy, because we need a commitment. We need a commitment from you all to engage in those things, to volunteer when there are important tasks that need to be done, to sustain the church, both spiritually and financially. We need your financial commitments. And so those are things that we are asking of you. In an ongoing way, we think this sustainability fund will help us catch a breath. We, as Sam has said, as Reverend Sam has said, we have been in a position where we have this building that we have not been able to use. It's cost us a fair amount of money to get here, but it also is going to cost money to use. And we need sustainability in balancing the budget and getting to a place where we have the revenues that we need to do the kind of outreach that we do, both from the standpoint of our ministry as well as from a standpoint of renting the building. We need sustainability. And then in the longer term, we need planned giving. We need an ongoing program of thinking about legacy giving. And also thinking about how in the shorter term we might think of those of us that are retired and have to, for example, take a required distribution every year on our retirement funds, maybe dedicating part of those funds to the church. So all of those programs together are things that, in my mind, we commit to really make a commitment to hope for our future, to build community. And those things, as we say in the geopolitical world, freedom is not free. The sense of community that we have, the hope that we have for our future, a socially just and loving future, is not free either. And we need your commitments, both in terms of time, talent, and treasure, to make that happen.
Here's something to expect. So we wanted to bring this information for you now so you can churn and reflect. Of course, if you have questions today, you can start putting them in the chat box, and that will allow me and Tom to see if there are any themes or questions in particular that we could address. But we are on the edge of stewardship season this month and maybe going a little bit into April. And here's something that you can expect. First is that in early March, within the first week or two, you're going to receive your stewardship materials in the mail. Old school delivery system. I heard that paper, and we're going to send you paper products in the mail. It's not going to be a Google Doc. So you're going to get your stewardship materials in the mail. And it's going to highlight some of these themes that we've shown for you, as well as different ways of thinking about giving. It's going to show you the budgets in terms of the information from the financial planning tool, but it's also going to show you a fair share giving guide of different ways to think about, well, I'm feeling really connected to Mountain Vista, or maybe I feel like just a supporter. I'm kind of on the edge of Mountain Vista. I like it. Or maybe you feel like you're a sustainer, someone that's like, actually, I'm a damn pillar of Mountain Vista, and that's the level I like to give at. It's going to give you some different tools to think about what feels right for you in the next year. It's also going to ask you to consider giving to the Sustainability Fund. So that will be a section that says, would you be willing to make a gift to this kind of short-term capital campaign that would allow us to balance the budget and then do some growth investments in the next couple of years for our ministries? And you'll see a little bit more about the Sustainability Fund in that. You're going to get an invitation to connection. You can always say no, but I hope you say yes. You're going to be contacted by a visiting steward, and it might be me, it might be a board member, it might be a finance committee member, it might be another lay leader in the congregation. And we're basically going to call you and ask you, how are you feeling at Mountain Vista? This is not a ploy to make you give more money, because the whole point of us contributing resources is because we actually feel that loop of giving and receiving from each other. So part of it feels really important to say, how are you feeling? How are you feeling as we're on the edge of this transition? How are you feeling connected? What's working for you? And then to say, at what level does your financial commitment feel like it's resonant with where you're at in your life and where you're feeling belonging at Mountain Vista? And then to celebrate whatever the hell you do, whether that's not give anything or whether that's increase your pledge. We want you to have access to the numbers. We want you to check in about what this community feels like and means like to you, and then to give until it feels good, until you feel it. So we'll be there to answer any questions you have. We hope that you have that conversation, and then return your financial commitment forms before April 1st. That allows our finance committee and our board to make meaningful decisions about the budget. What we proposed for you today is the planning tool. It's not the budget for next year. So our finance committee and our board will have to hold the tool and then hold your response to the stewardship campaign together and make decisions together about the best way forward for next year. They propose a proposal budget to the board finalizes that budget, and then you pass that budget at the congregational meeting in May. But the hope here is that there's an invitation for you to do some reflection around how this community nourishes you, what it means to you, and then what you're able to give at this point in your own life and your own financial wellness to contribute to the flow of resources that we try to do at Mountain Vista. So I think that's where we're at. Tom, do you have a closing thought? And I'll check to see if there's any questions in the chat.
My own closing thought is that, in a personal sense, as I think about what this congregation has meant to me and how important it is to keep the flame of this chalice burning brightly. I think of it as a symbol of pushing back the darkness that's going on in the world. I think of it as a time for the fact that when I first went to a Unitarian church and they lit the chalice, it's the first experience I'd ever had in a religious ceremony where they actually did that. And that flame meant something very special to me. And it really comes down to this. It's like I personally want to evaluate a commitment to make that flame burn ever brighter. And that takes resources. And so I hope you'll give that consideration as you think about your own commitment to pushing back the darkness, to making the bright flame of the chalice remain bright and even brighter.
Thank you, Tom. And before we close the presentation, we'll go into gallery view and we'll see if there's any just reflections or questions. But I have so much gratitude for our board navigating such a challenging time, and for previous boards, all of you who were previous board members, and the hard decisions you had to make to get us here. And then the current board members who are making hard decisions again to get us to where we're going next. The finance committee members who do so much work and you never get to see them. They work quietly over here trying to figure out how to take care of us financially. I'm thinking about all these aspects of congregational life, that from buildings and grounds, people cleaning up the garden, people tending the parking lot. I'm thinking about the people who make meals and who show up when it's hard to show up and who send cards and make calls, and the people who are doing justice work, and the people who are making sure you have a Sunday service every Sunday to reconnect you and inspire you. It's an incredible amount of work to build the membership of this community, the community connections team that meets with every single person. Your community connections team, Tom Bunch and team, meet with every single person who reaches out to us, and we offer a one-on-one with them. I mean, take that in. Anyone who reaches out to our community gets reached back to. So I just celebrate the work you've done, because clearly it's deep and it's wide. So we're gonna go into gallery view and hear your questions. I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna unspotlight me and Tom. And so that way it might be easier to see other people, and it should make it easier for all of you to go into gallery view. Yeah. And I'm also gonna make it so that you can unmute yourself, but be kind, people. And please listen, let someone finish completely the thought before you jump in. So you should all be able to unmute yourself. If you raise your hand, we prefer to call on you first, probably. Any questions, clarifying questions that would help you understand what we're sharing? And then maybe just reactions and feelings. If you've got feelings, you probably have feelings. Yeah, John, our meditator extraordinaire. I'm trying to unmute you, but for some reason it's hard. I see that you've raised your hand and I'm asking you to unmute. Let's see if it works. And it doesn't seem to be working. John, for some reason, I can't unmute you. Would you maybe write your question in the chat? That might be one way for us to check in. Any other questions or feelings on the top of your heart? You could also just talk about your feelings. That's fine too. What a change in finances. Tell me what's on your heart. Oh, got it. Good. Okay. John wants to hear more about this. And I'm going to, I might also unmute Tom Bunch if you're in the house, Tom. I can probably talk about these numbers and you might talk about them even better. So Tom Bunch, if you want to talk about them first. John is looking at what we've reported to the UUA and he's wondering why am I saying we've grown?
Right. Hi, John. When I came on board as membership chair 3 years ago, the first thing that we started to do was to look at and sort of clean up those numbers. So there were a number of people who had left, but had not been removed from the roles. And so we put together a list of people that we needed to contact, individually and make sure that they were no longer with us. And then we actually hit sort of a stall when COVID came and a lot of those connections weren't made. And just within the period of COVID, we did get around to talking to those people. And so then I've not taken these numbers that UUA had, but I can show you exactly who left, what the numbers were, and where we started 3 years ago. Once we removed the people who are not here now and were not here then. So these are based on a baseline that is different from what was being reported.
I think one thing to be excited about is that we have real numbers now. There are no ghost members. When Tom Bunch and I look at the members list, we know all the people on the list. That's because if someone hasn't been connected to us, we've asked them, how are you feeling? And is this still a place where you want to be a member? So that's another reason why the numbers are lower, because there was a sincere request to be like, what is the real number here? And I think where we're going to end up the year at this point is close to about 125. Is that about right, Tom? 125. But we have another new member ceremony coming up in the next couple of months where we already have folks who want to join. So we might end up higher than that. Sherry, thanks for raising your hand.
Sure. Okay, well, mine's kind of a small question, not a big one. I'm impressed with what you all put together and how well you're articulating it. I personally believe that part of the reason why we've done so well in the past couple of years is because of the expertise and skillfulness of the online presence. That's attributable to you, Sam, your skills in this area, to Baja 4, and the other people that have been able to contribute to it. And I'm aware that, at least to my knowledge, we still don't have anybody that's going to be our tech person at MVUU. And I'm worried about that because I want to see that part of who we have become very recently to continue into the future. And I'm just curious how you've added that to the future, because I think it's really critical. Yes.
Yes. I don't know how many of you know this, but I left my previous job before coming to you all because it was on Zoom. I don't know how many of you know that. I used to do a lot of my work on Zoom and I thought, I can't Zoom anymore. I can't work on Zoom anymore. And what the hell happens, y'all? You go Zoom. So yes, it's been a good thing that you've had a millennial minister who is very comfortable on Zoom. However, I think that there is more embedded here, the Baja 4, of course. one thing that you can trust is that I think some of you are beginning to learn these skills and develop comfort with it. So there is a community leadership strategy here of you all beginning to take some of these skills on yourselves. Two is that in the projected, in the financial planning tool, which again, I want to say might be different than what your final board decision is, because the finance committee and the board need to make decisions based on the pledge and the stewardship campaign. But in the financial planning tool, we fund all staff positions. So in your next year with your next minister, you have an AV tech position, you have a coordinator of religious education, you keep your RE assistant, our fabulous Stacy Sosa, you have Chris, you have Aaron, all staff positions are fully funded. And we've struggled getting folks interested in these part-time positions, partly because I think everyone's struggling to get people interested in part-time positions right now. And that might change and we'll have to address it. But one thing you can know in the financial planning tool is the acknowledgement that this is a needed resource. Also, I've experienced your board is so supportive of this. In recent months, we haven't been able to find someone interested in this position, but when we've had folks willing to do short time work, like, oh, I can help for this amount of money or this amount of time, your board has been like, whatever we need to have quality audiovisual technology. So your board has been like, what do we need? And we're going to do it because the priority is accessibility for all of you.
Can I just make a quick gratitude comment for Lee McNeely and Todd, who have been standing in the breach and have taken on this task. And then Cassandra and others have stepped up to support as well. So I just want to give them an acknowledgement of what gratitude we have as a board for their work, and also our commitment to make sure that we have good audio visual going forward.
What you got, Pi?
I was just giving Tom a thumbs up for Lee and Todd and Kathy and all that people have helped.
Cassandra.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Cassandra, Lee and Todd. I mean, and then I think a few other people have stepped in. Dan Ovid has stepped in. Chuck Tatum has stepped in. So this is another area where leadership is being developed across more people than just one, which is always probably a better strategy. So there's so many people who stepped in. And also a big gratitude to you and Pi and Jean-Bour,
Yes.
who were part of significantly giving to make sure we had all the AV technology we needed. I mean, that you all did that. And you were part of responding to those needs. And I mean, so grateful for you both.
Mm-hmm. It just again, a quick, one of the things that doesn't often appear, I think, in front of the congregation is all the work that goes on behind the scenes. And one of the things that I think some of you that back in the summer, we attended a brief training session with an audio engineer who was part of the company that installed the audio equipment in the sanctuary, in the new sanctuary. And we had a rude awakening that there were pieces of equipment that were not purchased. There was technology that was way above our pay grade. I think all those things happen. And so I just want to again acknowledge that all the work that had to go into finding the right equipment, learning the equipment, and just again appreciating all of you who took a part of that. It was just an incredible effort to get the technology, the AV equipment correct and right, so that we could do Zooming and services from the sanctuary. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So wishing I was in a room with you right now where I could just like feel your vibes. I wonder how you're feeling in your heart, maybe even visually. Are you feeling like, oh, this is okay, we can do this together? Are you feeling like, I'm a little freaked out by this? You're like, I got some big questions. Can you call me? And I'm just going to looking at your hands. Okay. Oh my God. Wow. I want to say I see a lot of thumbs up, but if you have a thumb down, we love you and we want to hear it. Oh, Joe, I see you. Good to see you, Joe. Oh, okay. Oh, good. Well, I see that there's just a lot of feelings of optimism and hope, which is so good to see. I'm wondering if any of our other board members or finance committee members who've been part of this, I don't know, Elena, no pressure, if any of you want to offer any words before we kind of maybe officially close the space, but I think most of us can linger if you have questions that you want to keep asking, but we can officially close this down. Joe, go ahead and unmute if you can.
Yeah. Hi. The question I have is, I don't recall anybody saying anything about the new minister, who takes on the role of I guess the leader of us all. How does that? I mean, does he or she? I'm assuming he or she can play a major role in changing these plans that we're putting out here now, or is it firm that once we decide on going forward, that's it? I mean, you know what I'm saying? That basically, and say a word about that person, and that's an important part of the whole puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I want to defer again to Tom Bunch, your search team chair. What do you want to say about that, Tom?
So I think that Samantha has done a lot of really good modeling here. She's gotten her hands dirty. She's jumped in with this, and she's realized she needed help. And she went out and she got a consultant, and the board empowered her, gave her, use your time. We want you to use your time to do this. And so we expect you to be a big part of this work. And the board has also put that in the proposed contract for the new minister, that we expect this to be part of your job. And we've struggled a little bit in the past few years with the stewardship program. It's been hard to get energy behind that. And so they've turned to a model which says the minister is going to play a big role. If we need help, we'll get help. And this is how we're doing things at the moment. And that message is being communicated to your ministerial candidates that, and if you're not ready, we will help you get trained. And are you down with this? And so it's being very directly communicated with the new minister prospects.
Also, I get to meet with both of your candidates, and I get to spend time with them in person. And all I want is your success. So I'm going to front load the hell out of them. Here's where they're at. Here's where this beautiful community has been. This is what they did a huge capital campaign. Then they were in diaspora. Then they were in a pandemic. Hell yeah, they got tired. But here's the vision they have for themselves. And here's all the resources they have to get there. And they're eager and willing. And so that's one of the benefits too of the model for me to meet with your candidates is I get to say, here's really the core of the ministry. And then your search team gets to be honest and ask probing questions to really feel into their readiness, because we're not hiding anything from them. We're being really, really upfront. They'll see this presentation. You can kind of wave to them now, and they will watch it and they'll see what you're saying. And I see some of you waving. Yes. They're going to watch this. They will have a quiz. Yeah. I heard that Cynthia and Richard might be raising their hands. Were you Cynthia and Richard? And go ahead and unmute.
I did, but it's further afield from myself even. I think we need to reach out. As a group, as a congregation, we need to reach out as individuals. We need to reach out in our small groups. And we need to reach out to find those people, as you so well put it, Reverend Sam, about, I found my people. But I think we also need to explore who is in our people and expand ourselves, perhaps. And I'm really referring now to the Beloved Conversations Among program, which is still, I think, in its infancy, and I have not been able to give it the time I wanted to. But I think we need to think of ourselves as growing spiritually in this process as well.
Thank you. Are you sure? Okay, so if someone calls you and says, I want to talk to you about stewardship, are you going to pick up? And be honest with them about how you're feeling and how you're doing and what you're needing? Yeah, I'm looking at all of you. It's the creepy part of Zoom. Okay. Well, I know I don't know how to even I don't know how to tell you how full my heart feels this morning with the Sunday service and with this conversation with you. I don't even have the words in my own very wordy being to share with you how I'm feeling, but I know it just feels like gratitude and heart openness. And this is how it should feel. I mean, it also can feel hard and painful because there's also growth in that, but this is the foundation. This is why we can do hard things, because at the bedrock is a feeling of, yes, we can because we have each other. And because, yes, we can because we have each other, then when we fight or we have conflict or we struggle or we have disagreements or when unexpected pandemics happen during an interim ministry, when you don't have a building and you're having a deficit, you can get through it and grow. So I think those are my closing words. Tom Sawyer, did you have any closing words that you want to offer before we stop recording?
Well, just two quick comments. One is that, this service, those of you that attended the service before this fellowship hour, I mean, what better heartfelt tug, what better inspiration for community can you ever have? I just am blown away by the quality that Reverend Sams brings to us and the people that, like Kyoko. I mean, my goodness. I mean, where else? How else could you ever experience anything quite like that? And I have the opportunity to talk to once a month over usually about 17 board presidents from all over the Southwest. And I can tell you that you are all to be congratulated. Compared, and I'm not into comparison much, but I can tell you that what we have managed to pull off through the pandemic in terms of community, in terms of growth, in terms of financial movement. I would like to say stability. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. What we've done in those areas is remarkable. And I want to congratulate all of you for the contribution you make in time, talent, and treasure. It's remarkable.
And before we close, in the spirit of what spiritual community is all about, I think there's an announcement from Sally. Sally, would you remind us of the why we're talking about money?
I'll be delighted to do that. I have, for those that don't know, for several weeks now, I have been visiting with Evelyn and Leon Bennett Elder. And Evelyn gave me a note the last time I saw her on Thursday. And they asked that I give it to the congregation. So here we go. She wrote this on the 15th. Thank you for the flowers and kind messages. You make us feel we are still part of the UU family and community. We are as fortunate to be close by. Whenever you visit, you bring good cheer. Thank you so much. Love, Evelyn and Leon.
May we continue to deepen and widen our ministries. Thank you, everyone.